commercial reference. No, the light's on. Can you hear me now good? I just think of the Verizon commercial. Lights, camera, Jesus. I like that. That's good. Are you guys ready for a brief respite from the genius that is Ken Needham? Yes? Okay. Here we go. Where were we last when we left off? Anybody remember?
Genesis 38.
So we just finished Judah Tamar. We're getting to the chapter that I've been trying to get to this whole time since I started teaching with you guys. And we are finally there. This chapter is the first time that I happened upon a waha'o moment where I came to that conclusion all on my own and then went and did research and found that most of the Bible scholars are like, yeah, that's a thing. And I was like, whoa, I didn't even ask them about this. But I found it. Sweet. So, you know what? We're going to try it without this today. That way I don't get distracted drawing things down. You have to write it down for yourselves if you want to write it down. You don't have to write it down. You can if you would like to. Okay, before we start reading, we need to do two things. We need to pray, and then we need to recap like what we're looking for and why we're looking for those things. Okay, let's pray. Jesus, as we study your word, we want to keep our eyes completely fixed on you, God, as we look at this story. There's a lot of details. Would you help the right ones that you want to pop and make them pop? We love you, and we're excited to hear from you through the course of today. In Jesus' name, amen. All right. We're looking for hyperlinks, themes, motifs, which I did discover the difference between themes and motifs. Motifs are much larger groups of themes that are repeated over time. It's really that design pattern thing. Motifs and design patterns are the same thing. Really big bunches of themes that are all facing the same direction or repeat. So it's like really big themes. Okay, cool. Yes, we also have the space-time continuum. So we're watching for where they hit the fast-forward button and it goes, and we're watching for those Deadpool moments where all of a sudden the author breaks the fourth wall. It's like, hold on there, reader. Let's talk about what they were thinking about in this moment. And you're like, we just think it as we're like reading a book. We're like, oh, yeah, they were thinking this. But like, this is something that doesn't happen in real life unless you're thinking your own thoughts. You can't think other people's thoughts in real life. Has anybody ever thought someone else's thoughts? Anybody? No? You have, Sam. Oh, okay. Okay. Yes. Deadpool lets us think his thoughts. He reasons through things with us and pauses time. The author here will do that occasionally. But they will also hit the fast forward button and be like, and all the details from here till this next part you don't need to know about. We'll skip that. And you're like, wait, but anybody ever wonder what happened between the age of 12 and 30 with Jesus? They skipped all that. Why did they skip all that? Apparently it wasn't important enough. I don't know why, but it wasn't. Okay. All right. Genesis 39. You guys ready?
Yes.
Don't forget to waha'o when you happen upon something that pops for you.
Can you remind us what that means?
What is happening here? What is going on? These are the options of what is going on. These are the most reasonable options for what's going on. Oh, this is how it applies to my life. Waha'o. The only way waha'o works is if you take it super slow. That's why it's going to take us this full hour to read one chapter. That's why we've been doing that same thing when we started in Genesis chapter 37. Right? It takes a long time to read waha'o style. That's why the Bible is meditation literature, because you're not going to see all of the waha'os the first time you read something. Okay, here we go. If you guys see something that's very different in your translation that's different than mine, please be like, wait a minute, that's weird. Because there's a whole bunch of weirdness in here. Now Joseph had been taken down to Egypt. Oh my gosh, it's a hyperlink. And Potiphar, new character, an Egyptian officer of Pharaoh, who is a recurring character, the captain of the bodyguard, bought him from the Ishmaelites. There is a note on that. Does anybody have that note on from the Ishmaelites?
What translation do you have?
I am in the NASB.
Hold on.
This is the key hyperlink that I would like you guys to see this chapter. They use it in the first verse, but they're going to repeat it over and over and over again And the authors in English get a little carried away with using alternative words. So in my translation, there's a little note that says, bought him from, and on from there's a little I, and it says literally, from the hand of the Ishmaelites.
Midianites too?
It said Midianites in yours?
Yeah. It says
Isn't that interesting?
Midianites.
Verse 1.
Wait,
Now everybody's going to be like, wait, there's from the hand of...
okay.
So don't get confused with Midianites and Ishmaelites. That's a long story in a different direction. We're going to leave that one. That is a...
Wasn't it say in chapter 37 Ishmaelites and Midianites?
Yes, it does. Yes, so some translators go with Midianites, some translators go with Ishmaelites because they don't know which one to take. That's, again, another long story in a different direction. Very complicated theological arguments. Who had taken him down there. Down again. We've just repeated down twice. They're saying down is kind of this, like we're going down to Egypt. There are a whole bunch of people that have gone down to Egypt. It's happening again. Here we go. And the Lord was with Joseph, so he became a successful man, or prosperous. And he was in the house of his master, the Egyptian. So notice we've removed the name Potiphar, and now he's just his master, the Egyptian. Now his master saw that the Lord was with him, and how the Lord caused all that he did to prosper in his hand. So, what?
Have we gotten to other prospers or not?
Yes, there are lots of, so you remember when, let me just make sure it's the same word. I'm pretty sure it's the same word.
I'm thinking of the story, but I don't know where it is.
Which story are you thinking of?
The story where Jacob, is it Jacob? He works for 7 years for his wife, and everything he does prospers.
That's in Genesis chapter 30 or 31, maybe 29. Those ones are hazy now in my head, but it's somewhere in there. The story of Jacob and Laban, that's 29. It's not the only place. This whole thing is about, like, it starts with, hang on. The theme there starts in Genesis chapter 1, verse 27 and 28. And God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him. Male and female he created them. And God blessed them. And God said to them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it. And rule over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the sky and over every living thing that is on the earth. God is telling man, it is your prerogative to prosper by bringing blessing and cultivating this planet. He repeats it again in Genesis chapter 2. Then Genesis chapter 3, we make it really difficult on ourselves when we try to prosper by doing something the way that God told us not to do it. And then God starts making covenants with people and saying, behold, if you do these things, you're going to prosper. Be a blessing to the world. And whatever you bless, I will bless. And whatever you curse, I will curse. Sounds like Abraham, yeah? Wait a minute. And God repeats those things to Isaac and to Jacob. And now God's just doing it for Joseph. Whatever Joseph does, it prospers. Whatever is in Joseph's hand. So Joseph found favor in his sight and became his personal servant. And he made him overseer over his house. And all that he owned he put in his charge. But there's a note there. What do you think that word is actually in the Hebrew? Bingo. They're going to say hand a bazillion times in this chapter. And the English translators, unless they are very particular about making sure that they use the repeating words intentionally, are going to try to change it. Not because they're like, oh, we want to make you avoid it, but because they're like, if someone doesn't know how to read like this, it's going to get really repetitive and weird. So they're making a judgment call, which is not the worst thing in the world to do. It's reasonable in certain instances. But the way we're reading it, we want to see those repeated words. And so you're going to have to look through the disguising of them. And it came about that from the time he made him overseer in his house, over all that he owned, the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house on account of Joseph. Thus the Lord's blessing was upon all that he owned in his house and in the field. So he left everything he owned in Joseph's hand, and with him there he did not concern himself with anything except the food which he ate.
We got the blessing.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Nick.
Is there any reason why he avoids using Potiphar's name and keeps calling him the Egyptian or the master?
It's a great question, again in a different direction. But yes, that is another pondering and another musing. In the book of Genesis, how many Egyptians appear?
Yes.
This is the first one that we're aware of, except for the potential that, yes, Abraham ran down to Egypt twice. Isaac tried to go down to Egypt, and God said, no, you can't do that, right? There's all these times where you go to Egypt. How many times do we run into Egyptians? Not many. How many times do we run into foreigners? Lots, right? Apparently, in this story, it's not as important that we know it's Potiphar, because he already said his name is Potiphar, but apparently it's important that we remember that they're Egyptian and that we've gone down to Egypt. Yes? Okay. I was at the end of verse 6. Now Joseph was handsome in form and appearance. That hand is not the same hand. This is actually a hyperlink. Do you guys remember in the story? Who else was handsome in form and appearance? This is, yes, that's actually true. That's not the hyperlink I'm thinking of, though. I'm thinking of hyperlinks in Genesis. There is another one, at least one. But the literal translation is pleasing to look at and good on the eyes.
Sounds like fruit.
Sounds like fruit. Also sounds like Rachel in the story of Jacob with Leah and Rachel. It's the exact same phrase used to describe Rachel in the story of Leah and Rachel. Interesting, yes? And it came about after these events that his master's wife looked with desire at Joseph, or looked up at Joseph, or saw Joseph. So we're really feeling the fruit from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil analogy here. That's what they're hinting at, yes? And she said, lie with me. Now, this sounds like a sexual scandal about to happen, yes? Yep. You guys know how the story goes, yes? No spoilers? Where else recently have we studied where there was sexual scandal? Just a chapter ago in Judah, yeah? We should be seeing this and comparing the two. They are to be lined up one against the other. Judah does not bat an eye about going and finding someone else's spouse or another woman who is not his wife and just sleeping with her. What is Joseph going to do? But he refused and said to his master's wife, behold, with me here, my master does not concern himself with anything in the house, and he has put all that he owns in my hand. There is no one greater in this house than I, and he has withheld nothing from me except you, because you are his wife. And then there's a turn of phrase here. How could I do this great evil, not and sin against my master, or sin against you, and sin against God? Interesting, yes?
I have a question.
Yes.
Being the oldest brother, does that put you in charge of everything in the household?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Convenient how that works, isn't it? And it came about, she spoke to Joseph day after day, but he did not listen to her or lie beside her or be with her.
Is this the first time someone didn't listen to somebody?
Yeah. Well, so before we've had all these situations where, and the man listened to his wife and something went completely awry, right? For the first time in a while, the man doesn't listen to the woman when the woman makes an easy option out, like the shortcut option, right? Interesting, yeah? Which, in my mind, I'm like, almost all the time when my wife offers me an option, it's like the harder, more difficult option. I'm glad my wife is my wife. She's cool. I like her. Yeah. Okay, continuing on. Verse 11. Now it happened one day, wait a second, what has just happened? we have jumped in the space-time continuum. They hit the fast-forward button, right? They summarized by saying, and it came about as she spoke to him day after day, so we're passing day after day after day after day, right? Now it happened one day. And it came about when he went into the house to do his work, and none of the men in the household were inside. She caught him by his garment, saying, lie with me. Garment! Another hyperlink. Lie with me, which is, she just said that earlier, right? And he left his garment in her hand and fled and went outside. Yes?
Didn't Judah lose things to Tamar that caused him to be
Oh my gosh, it's so cool. Not cool that like the garments are getting lost, but it's like the connections, right? Wild. There's a direct correlation right there. And he left his garment in her hand and fled and went outside. When she saw that he had left his garment, that he had left his garment in her hand, now she has an option, right? If we're waha'oing, what are her options? She can either pretend like nothing ever happened. She can continue to go on this course of action that she's doing. She can find a different route. Those are like the three, and then there's like sub-options in there, right? What is the easy option that sounds like the fruit? What is the hard option that sounds like the right thing to do? She has all these options staring her in the face, right? When she saw that he had left his garment in her hand, all of a sudden a fruit-like option presented itself, and he had fled outside. She called to the men of the house and said to them, see, he has brought in a Hebrew. Wait a minute, who has brought in a Hebrew? The master of the house, yeah. To us, to make sport of us, or to play with us. He came into me to lie with me, and I screamed. And it came about when he heard that I raised my voice and screamed that he left his garment beside me and fled and went outside. So she left his garment beside her until his master came home. She lied. There has been a lying theme throughout the course of Scripture, right? And usually that is the forbidden fruit. Yes?
This is another time where clothes have been used to trick someone.
Interesting. So very interesting, isn't it? That's a great observation, Sam. I would like to point out that when you really slow this down, we just read that day after day after day, she keeps trying to convince him to lie with her. Yes? All those days, the men of the household are in the household, around. Do you think they were unobservant of the fact that she was trying to sleep with him? What was she trying to do? She's trying to get rid of him. Are any of the men of the household going to have the power to argue with her? No, she's the master's wife. These are the servants in the house. She is telling them what story they are to report to Potiphar.
It really stinks to be a slave.
Really stinks to be a slave, especially a slave that's trying to do the right thing and gets beat up for it. Yes?
We may have already mentioned this, I probably missed it, but when she takes the garment, it says, and she had the garment in her hand.
Interesting, yes? He has brought a Hebrew to us to make fun of us. And he came to lie with me and I screamed. Notice how the pronouns change, and no longer is she talking about Joseph, she is talking about Potiphar to the servants. She is also trying to turn the servants against Potiphar. Interesting, yes?
She wanted the master of the house.
You remember that part in Genesis chapter 3 where God tells Adam and Eve, and he's like, listen, your desire will be for the position for your husband. Yes. All of these riddles are hiding in here, being repeated over and over and over again, and we're starting to see them. Yes? They're popping through. Good observation, Lexi. To make fun of us, or to make sport, or to play, the same word is used when Isaac is found playing with his wife when they go to Abimelech in Genesis chapter 26. So you remember Isaac goes to not Egypt, but to Abimelech and says, she's my sister, just like Abraham had done twice. And we're like, oh no, this never ends well. And so then the king looks out his window and sees Isaac playing or something, laughing with his wife. Same word. There's a hyperlink here. There's a big rabbit bunny trail there. We don't have time to get into it. But that's another one. Okay, verse 17. Then she spoke to him with these words. So I'm guessing it's to Potiphar. The Hebrew slave whom you brought to us came in to make sport of me. And it happened as I raised my voice and screamed that he left his garment beside me and fled outside. This woman who you gave to me, she turned and gave me this fruit, and I ate. Sound familiar? Phrasing? Yes? Oh. Now it came about. Oh, we hit the fast forward button again. When his master heard this, the words of his wife, which she spoke to him, saying, this is what your slave did to me, that his anger burned. At whom? It doesn't say. Who is he mad at? Do you think all of his slaves would have listened to his wife and told him the same story? We don't know. They didn't tell us. I would think that part of it is because he didn't concern himself with anything that was in his house aside from the food he ate. We don't know what he's mad at. I don't know if he knows what he's mad at. He's just mad.
Only one of them gets punished.
One of them gets punished.
Get rid of his wife.
Well,
his
but
slave.
can you just get rid of your wife or just get rid of your slaves? Like, when you don't know, especially if you don't know who the real perpetrator is. So he's got to go off of what he hears because he hasn't been paying attention. What were you going to say?
I was just saying, I mean, it's not Israelite culture. He could probably just get rid of his wife if he wanted to.
Maybe. That's possible. That leads to a whole lot more issues in the social cultural realm, though, than just getting rid of one of your slaves. Like being like, hey, why'd you get rid of that really helpful slave that's making everything you do prosper? Well, it turns out he was trying to sleep with my wife. That's an easier explanation with your other people that you're talking to than, why'd you get rid of your wife? Well, she was trying to sleep with my slave. That sounds like you have marital problems. All of a sudden, the focus turns on him rather than on the slave. See how that works? As he's trying to explain it to his friends. Hopefully he's got friends, I would hope. Do you see how that could be a possible solution? I'm not saying that is the solution. I'm saying that could be a possible solution. Yes?
His anger was also aroused.
His anger, yes. So Joseph's master took him and put him into the jail, the place where the king's prisoners were confined. Yes?
Why not Pharaoh? Why king?
Interesting that they switched the word, isn't it? I'm glad you're seeing these things. I'm not going to answer those things for you. You get to go through them on your own. Where the king's prisoners were confined, and he was there in the jail. But the Lord was with Joseph and extended kindness to him and gave him favor. Yep. And gave him favor in the sight of the chief jailer. This is like a repeat of what just happened with Potiphar, yes?
Mine transition to something else.
What does it say?
It says, with steadfast love and gave him favor.
Interesting. The phrasing is different, yeah? Favor. And the chief jailer committed to Joseph's hand all the prisoners who were in the jail. So whatever was done there, he was responsible for it. Now hang on, there's a note there. He was the doer of it. He literally did all the things, which is it's like the chief jailer did not supervise anything under in Joseph's hand because the Lord was with him. And whatever he did, the Lord made to prosper.
Repeat. Like this is a repeat.
We have just cycled through.
Just moved to the prison.
Yes, we have cycled through two stories that are the exact same in the span of one story. But now, remember that these chapter separations didn't exist when they wrote this down originally, right?
What did
The chapter numbers. When they first wrote this scroll, there were no chapter numbers. So that's not necessarily like the end of that story, right? Because we know the rest of the first version of that story. What happens is everything gets put into Joseph's hand. God makes it prosper because Joseph's actually trying to be a blessing to someone. And then it backfires on him. I'm trying to decide if we can make a run at 40 or if not. No, we're not going to. I want to take this from the wa, ha, ah to the o section. We have just heard about how whatever was placed in Joseph's hand, God made it to prosper. And we watched as several times there were offers for Joseph to take things for himself that God did not put into his hand or that someone else did not put into his hand. And to us, looking at the comparison between Joseph and Judah, we see that when he says no to those things that are offered to him, he is distinctly saying no to taking the fruit from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Yes? We are watching him where he just takes what God puts into his hand and God makes everything prosper, and we're watching him say no to the tree from the fruit on the bad tree. And yet everything doesn't work out for Joseph in this instance because he's not seeing the end goal. He has not jumped outside the space-time continuum. We have, right? Spoilers, everything eventually does turn out all right for Joseph, right? But right now, they're not all right. He's gone from being sold into slavery.
Above ground to underground.
Yeah, like he keeps going down. Yeah?
Yeah, that's
He's
true.
going down and down and down and down. But in those moments,
Bring him up.
yes, we're waiting for God to bring him up. But also, can we talk about the fact that it seems like Joseph, for the first chapter that we read together, 37, attempted to put himself at the top by saying, I had this dream. And he continued to share these dreams with his brothers to the point where his brothers hated him, where he was over his brothers and his father and his mother. Everybody was bowing down to him. And now, when he's deciding to serve God by being a blessing with whatever's put into his hand, it keeps taking him down and down and down and down. Interesting, yes? What does this mean for us? What is God putting into your hand? And what are the things in your life that you are attempting to take for yourself? Are you noticing blessing and bounty when you try and take things for yourself? Are you noticing that it gets harder and harder when you choose the right way and you decide not to take from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil? It's a lot of real life application in there. Yes? It applies to everything. Are you willing to only have what God puts in your hand? Adam and Eve were not, and that's why they took the tree. Judah was not. That's why he slept with his daughter-in-law. Kind of gross. Joseph wasn't at first, but finally made the decision, okay, I'm only going to do what God puts in my hand. And he's going through a Job moment where it's like, holy guacamole, this is getting harder. I did the right thing and it's backfiring. Why? Now, we're going to make a run at it. We're going to try and do chapter 40. You ready? Here we go. Then it came about after these things. So he just fast forwarded again. The cupbearer and the baker for the king of Egypt offended their lord, the king of Egypt. Yeah. And Pharaoh was furious with his two officials. So interchangeable. The chief cupbearer and the chief baker. So he put them in confinement in the house of the captain of the bodyguard in the jail, the same place where Joseph was imprisoned. And the captain of the bodyguard put Joseph in charge of them. And he ministered to them, and they were in confinement for days, some time. That ministered to them word is the same word that it talks about, and he blessed Potiphar. It's the exact same thing, but he's doing it to the chief baker and to the cupbearer.
Mine says served.
Attended. Very interesting. That's a difficult word to translate, isn't it?
Pharaoh? Potiphar?
No, Pharaoh is not Potiphar. Pharaoh and Potiphar are different people.
Potiphar is the chief of executioners, though.
Yes. Potiphar is very possibly the chief executioner. Wait, you said executioner or executor? Because both are
Mine says executioner.
executioner. It's very possible that Potiphar put him in the king's prison because that's where Potiphar got to hang out on a regular basis, and he liked Joseph and wanted to hang out with him even if he couldn't have him over his house. Interesting, yes? Then the cupbearer and the baker for the king of Egypt, who were confined in the jail, both had a dream on the same night. A dream! How many dreams have we had? A few. There's been a few dreams, or at least times where people are passing out, or God's causing a deep sleep to come over someone. Yes? Jacob, Abraham, Adam. Yeah? Oh! Each man with his own dream, and each dream with its own interpretation. Interesting that they spoil that for you. When Joseph came to them in the morning and observed them, behold, or look, he saw them and they were dejected. That is actually, I wonder if that's the, no, not even going to go down that rabbit hole. No. And he asked Pharaoh's officials who were with him in confinement in his master's house. Oh, wait, in his master's house? Okay. Why are your faces so sad today?
Wait, these are Pharaoh's officers, not Potiphar's officers?
It's not clear, but we're guessing he's talking about Pharaoh's officers, we think.
My translation says Pharaoh's officers.
Oh, did I say Potiphar's? I'm sorry. I said Pharaoh's. I should have said Pharaoh's. I apologize. Then they said to him, "We have had a dream, and there is no one to interpret it." Then Joseph said to him, "Do not interpretations belong to God?" Now, remember how we talked about looking up names and the meaning of names? When you see God in the scriptures, there are a few different pathways to take, but the most important one is usually they're using a specific name for God in a specific way. 430 in Young's. Let's see if we can find it. Someone will look that up in the Blue Letter Bible or Bible Hub or whatever you want. The word for God in verse 8. Because here's something interesting that our translators are making a judgment call again. So, God in this instance is a title, is the word Elohim. Now, that word gets used in Genesis chapter 1, but it also gets used of a whole bunch of spiritual beings throughout the course of the scriptures.
Wow, yeah, I'm kidding.
Yep. It's not just God. He could be saying, "Do not interpretations belong to the gods?" Not because he is saying it as a, the multiple gods are going to give me the interpretation, but because he's saying, how are they going to relate to this? They're Egyptians. When I say, don't interpretations belong to Yahweh, they're going to be like, who the heck is that? What?
God's actually last on the list.
Yeah.
That's kind of crazy.
Interesting, yeah? So he says, tell it to me, please. So the chief cupbearer, oh.
Earlier, he was interpreting his own dreams
Interesting, yeah?
about people bowing down to him. Like,
Yep.
he figured those one out on his own, apparently.
Right.
But this time, it's like God is the one who's going to interpret.
Interesting, yeah? That's a very good point. So the chief cupbearer told his dream to Joseph and said to him, "In my dream, look, there was a vine in front of me, and on the vine were 3 branches.
This sounds like the Garden of Eden.
And as it was budding, its blossoms came out, and its clusters produced ripe grapes." Where else have we seen grapes in the story of Genesis? Noah. Thank you. Yes. And after all the flood, Noah came out of the ark and built a vineyard and got very drunk on grapes. Okay. Onward. Now Pharaoh's cup was in my hand. So I took the grapes and squeezed them into Pharaoh's cup, and I put the cup into Pharaoh's hand. Then Joseph said to him, this is the interpretation of it. The 3 branches are 3 days. Within 3 more days, Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you to your office. I think it's to your place and will put Pharaoh's cup, and you will put Pharaoh's cup in his hand, according to your former custom when you were his cupbearer. Only keep me in mind when it goes well with you, or when it prospers you, yeah? And please do me a kindness by mentioning me to Pharaoh, and get me out of this house. House is also a theme that we've heard a lot, isn't it? For I was in fact kidnapped from the land of the Hebrews, and even here I have done nothing that they should put me in this dungeon, or in this pit. That's a tasty word. Very familiar. When the chief baker saw that he interpreted favorably, he said to Joseph, I also saw in my dream, and behold, there were 3 baskets of white bread on my head. And the tops of the baskets, there were all sorts of big food for Pharaoh, and birds were eating them out of the basket on my head. Then Joseph answered and said, this is its interpretation. The 3 baskets are 3 days. Within 3 more days, Pharaoh will lift up your head from you and will hang you on a tree, and the birds will eat your flesh off you.
This is not what mine says. Mine says impale your body on a pole.
Interesting. Yes? Interesting.
Basically, you're hung up and eaten.
Yep.
It's like a crucifixion.
Almost.
Mine says a tree.
Oh.
Yeah, hang you on a tree.
Hang you on a tree. Did I say that?
Wait. Dude, birds ate the flesh of bones, like, you know, the other guy next to him, got his eyeballs eaten out.
Okay. Indeed. Okay, let's bring the hyperlinks a little closer, though. Where else have we heard about trees in this book? Garden of Eden. There's a whole bunch of other places where trees show up as well, but that's the one that immediately hyperlinks for me, right? Then thus it came about on the 3rd day, which was Pharaoh's birthday. Happenstance. It might be the first birthday in the Bible.
On the 3rd day.
On the 3rd day. On the 3rd day, that he made a feast for all his servants. And he lifted up the head of the chief cupbearer and the head of the chief baker among his servants. And he restored the chief cupbearer to his office, and to his place. And he put the cup into Pharaoh's hand. But he hanged the chief baker, just as Joseph had interpreted to them. Yet the chief cupbearer did not remember Joseph, but forgot him. Koof. That sucks.
I feel like there's somebody who forgot something that I can't remember.
Yeah. Forgot him.
Forgot what God said.
Yep.
So, remember we were talking about, like, I don't know if it was in Ken's class or this class, but we talked about the law of first mention, but like where remember was first used,
Yep.
and like when God remembered Noah when he was in the ark, but remember didn't mean like he remembered him, it just like he decided to act. So like this could be where he, like, 'cause it's still fresh, like this happened 3 days ago, so maybe he didn't forget about Joseph, but like he just decided not to act on Joseph's behalf.
Interesting, yeah. Interesting. Anybody want to look up that word forgot and see where it connects to? If it connects forward or if only forward or backwards?
Which one?
Forward. So here, can I borrow that? Thank you. Forgot him. Sakah. Oh, Shakah. Excuse me. Shakah. The Genesis 40, verse 23.
Seems to forget.
Yep. Forget to ignore or cease to care. The other translation that's used is wither. Or like he pulled away, right? Do you know where the first use of that word is? In Genesis chapter 27. Do you know who uses it? Rebecca. Do you know why she uses it?
I
No, with Jacob, saying, when your brother forgets what you have done, then you can come back from your uncle Laban's house. But I don't think Esau would just forget about Jacob. It's in chapter 27. 27. Do you think Esau would actually forget about what Jacob did? Why else was Jacob super scared when he came back to present himself before Esau, right? Do you guys remember that story? And there's all this story about how he put like his family that he didn't care about first and then put his favorites back with him. And then after God broke his hip or whatever he did, dislocated his hip, then he changed his whole strategy and was like, I can't run away anyway. So I guess we're just going to put me right at the front. Esau didn't forget. He ignored the sin that his brother had done against him. Yeah? Or withered away from. Or I don't know if he forgave. He overlooked it. He let it go to a certain extent, enough to meet with him. But also notice that Jacob and Esau didn't end up like reconciling. There was like this moment of like, hey, it's good enough. Come join me. And Jacob's like, nah. He's like, no, come join me. And he's like, nah. He's like, come join me. And he's like, I'm good. I'll join you later. I'll come catch up with you. It's the very quiet response, actually. Because like, I'll get there. I'm going to be a little late. And then never shows up. Sounds like a bunch of characters. Interesting, yeah? I want to read one more verse with you, and then we will be done. 41, verse 1. Now it happened at the end of 2 full years that Pharaoh had a dream, and behold, he was standing at the Nile. They fast forward 2 years where Joseph is stuck in that prison doing the stuff that he's supposed to do as low as he possibly can go.
Hyperlinks to my past?
Yeah, hyperlinks all over the place. God has us stuck in places that we don't want to be. What do we do in the moments of waiting? Surf? Oh, that's what we do. Okay.
Oh, I thought you said serve.
Serve, yes. Surf? No. I mean, maybe a little bit, but only to keep you sane while you're serving. Remain faithful and obedient. What is God putting in your hand? God put the whole jail in Joseph's hand. He was faithful with it for 2 full years after he was supposed to get out according to what he had hoped. His expectations were not met. And there he was still serving in the jail. And after 2 full years, God's like, okay, we're going to connect all these dots back together. And that's where we're going to resume the next time we get to talk tomorrow. Tomorrow.
Yeah.
Same time tomorrow, friends.
And then on Friday?
And then on Friday. And hopefully we will finish this this section of Genesis, or at least most of it, by then, maybe. I don't know if we'll be able to get through 41 and 42 tomorrow and 43 and 44 the next day. We'll see. We got to get to 45. That's the goal. We'll see how far we get. Any questions? Is this making sense?
Yes.
This is fun. This is really fun.
Think so? Okay. You do have homework from this, though. The homework is, what is in your hand? What has God put in your hand, and what are you trying to take for yourself? Acknowledge that and be really honest about those things with yourself. If you don't know, maybe ask a friend who actually knows you, someone that you can trust, that will not shy away from telling you the hard things, and who gets this part and smells like Jesus. Ask that friend. Because if they don't smell like Jesus, they'll probably be really rude about it, and that's not fun. Oh, maybe they won't. Maybe they'll be kind about it. I'm assuming too much. You assume too much. That is a really obscure Star Wars meme. Okay. Yes, it's from the... Thank you for knowing. Yes, it was the...
Like the very first scene in the very first one.
I recognize the accent, that's why.
Yep. Okay, let's pray, and then let's get ready to listen to Ken again. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited for you guys. Okay. God, thanks for this time. We want to celebrate you and the fact that you constructed this somehow. You made it happen, that these stories made it all the way to us this much later. And you're using them to grow us, instruct us, teach us, provide us with wisdom for not just understanding Joseph's story, but understanding our story? Would we take it and apply it in very real ways as we go from here? In Jesus' name, amen. What? What's your full name? Zachary, which is a derivative of Zechariah, which is the book I'm currently studying.
Okay, so I dove more into Pharaoh versus King, and then probably back to Israel versus Jacob.
Yep.
They both have relation to God the mortal. Because Israel is God's given name to Jacob, and
Right.
Jacob is his mortal name. Pharaoh is divine like a god, and King is like a mortal man. But I can't figure out why they don't use it. I thought it was like a respect